Welcome back to What Is, the show where we dive deep into the everyday objects you usually ignore until they disappear or start smelling like fermented onions. Today, we're looking at the piece of technology so vital that without it, your shoes would be leather lined, torture chambers, and your feet would basically be biohazards. I am talking, of course, about the sock. Think about your socks for a second. Right now, they are trapped in a dark, humid environment, crushed under the weight of your entire body, and doing a thankless job of absorbing up to half a pint of sweat your feet produce every single day. Yes, that's right, half a pint. You're basically walking on two tiny fabric-covered sponges. But where did this odd, tubular garment come from? Was there a patient zero of Footwolf? To find out, we have to go back, way back, to when fashion meant not dying of frostbite. In the beginning, Caveman Steve didn't have argyle patterns. He had animal skins. The very first socks were likely just pieces of animal hide wrapped around the feet and tied at the ankles. They were bulky. They smelled worse than the feet themselves, and they definitely weren't moisture wicking. By the 8th century BCE, the Greeks were getting a bit more sophisticated. The poet Hesiod wrote about pileo, which were essentially socks made of matted animal hair. Imagine wearing a sweater made of dog shedding inside your shoes. This was the height of Greek luxury. The word sock itself comes from the Latin soccus. The Romans, ever the practical conquerors, used these to describe a lightweight, loose-fitting slipper worn by comic actors. That's right, socks were originally the footwear of comedians, which explains a lot about the socks with sandals look. In fact, archaeologists have found Roman socks in North Yorkshire, England. And guess what? They were worn with sandals. We discovered bronze statues from that era that clearly show the straps of a sandal over fabric socks. So the next time you see a tourist at the Grand Canyon rocking the wool and Birkenstock combo, don't laugh. They aren't unfashionable. They're Roman Empire reenactors. But the real game changer happened in Egypt. Around the 3rd to 6th century AD, the Egyptians invented Coptic socks. These were created using a technique called nail binding, which is like knitting's older, more complicated cousin. What makes these socks famous is the split toe. They were designed specifically to be worn with thonged sandals that look exactly like lobster claws. If you want to feel like a crustacean while walking to the Nile, the Coptic sock is for you. As we move into the Middle Ages, socks become more than just foot protectors. They become a flex. By the 10th century, hosen were the big thing. These were essentially leggings made of colourful cloth that covered the legs and the feet. For nobility, these were the kind made of silk or fine wool. However, they didn't have elastic back then. If your socks didn't fit perfectly, they just sagged around your ankles like sad, woolen pancakes. To fix this, people used garters, basically ribbons or leather straps tied around the calf to keep the sock from making a run for it. By the 15th century, the sock and the tights part of the hosen began to split. The bottom half became stockings, and the top half became breeches. And for a while, the flashiest thing a man could own was a pair of bright red silk stockings. If you weren't showing off your calves in some high-tension knitwear, were you even an aristocrat? Then in 1589, a man called William Lee changed everything. Lee was an English clergyman who noticed that his wife spent way too much time hand knitting. He decided to automate the process and invented the knitting frame. It was the only way to make a stocking faster. He took his invention to Queen Elizabeth I, hoping for a patent and a fortune. He showed her a pair of stockings made by his machine. and the Queen looked at them, wrinkled her nose, and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "These feel like garbage." Specifically, she refused him a patent because the stockings were made from wool and were too coarse for her royal ankles. She told him, "I have too much love for my poor people to pull their means of living from them by making them unemployed with your invention," which is a very polite way of saying, "I like silk and your machine is making me itchy." Lee eventually made a machine that could handle silk, but the damage was done. He died in poverty, never knowing that his invention would eventually lead to the industrialization of the entire textile industry. As the Industrial Revolution kicked into high gear, socks became mass-produced. They became cheaper, more accessible, and, thankfully, less itchy. The biggest revolution for your feet didn't happen until 1938. That was the year that DuPont introduced nylon. Before nylon, socks were either natural fibers like wool or silk, or they were cotton. They didn't stretch very well and they wore out quickly, and they took forever to dry. Nylon changed the game. It was strong, it was stretchy, and it paved the way for the blended fabric socks we wear today. In fact, when nylon stockings first hit the shelves in 1940, it caused nylon riots. Thousands of women lined up outside department stores, and in some cases, literal fistfights broke out over footwear. People were catching hands just to catch some synthetic fibers. The mid-20th century also gave us the tube sock. You know the one. White, knee-high, with 3 stripes at the top. It was the uniform of the 1970s. The beauty of the tube sock was that it had no heel. It was just a tube. One size fits all. It was the height of good enough engineering. Today, socks are a multi-billion-dollar industry. We have moisture-wicking socks for marathon runners, compression socks for frequent flyers, and smart socks that can track your running gait via sensors embedded in fabric. We've gone from wrapping our feet in dead squirrels to wearing wearable computers in our heels. But despite all of this technological progress, we still haven't solved the greatest mystery of the modern age, the missing sock. Scientists have actually looked into this. Psychologists and statisticians have come up with a sock loss index formula. It turns out that the average person loses about 15 socks a year. Over the lifetime, that's over 1,200 socks. Where do they go? Is there a wormhole in the back of your dryer? Is there a secret society of single sock enthusiasts living in your walls? The truth is usually less supernatural. Most lost socks are actually trapped inside the washing machine's inner workings, stuck behind the rubber seal of front loaders, or simply static clung to the inside of a pant leg, waiting to fall out at the most embarrassing moment possible, like during a job interview. So the next time you pull on a fresh pair of socks, take a moment to appreciate them. You're wearing 1,000 years of human ingenuity, from animal skin wraps of the Stone Age to the silk garters of the Renaissance and the high-tech synthetics of today. The sock is our first line of defense against the world. It's the unsung hero of the wardrobe. Whether they're argyle, neon, toe socks, or just plain on white cotton, they're doing the dirty work so your shoes don't have to. Just please try to keep them in pairs. They get lonely. Thank you for watching this episode of What Is. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world's most hard-working garment, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Do you have a theory as to where the missing socks go? Or maybe you're a Roman traditionalist who still wears socks with sandals. Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode where we explain the history of things you never knew you needed to know. We'll see you in the next one. Stay warm and keep your heels covered.